Hello, and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network, where we dive into wild. Hello, and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most scholastic work as it releases. I'm Elliot Diebold, and, well, lucky for all of us, that'll be the last time you have to hear me do that intro. Because, next week, we're back on our regular schedule. So, I guess let's head into our final special individual holiday schedule episode. As we talk about the 7.8 extra material, can we talk about the girls? It's kind of like a Jasmine interlude. It's basically the like the Kenneteer parent chapter, but it's focused in on Jasmine as a POV. And this is very exciting. I don't think anyone saw something like this coming. I love this. Like, we get updates on the Kenneteer home lives, which obviously, like, for Avery and Verona, we've had very specific questions that have been brewing around that stuff. And it just like helps keep us in touch with Kennet. I think it's very easy with all this Blue Heron Institute stuff going on to think about Kennet, the Carmine Beast, as like a bit of a faraway, non-urgent problem again, and this extra material is just a bit of a little poke to us to be like, hey, that's still important. Blue Heron Institute, that's not the main story that we're telling here. This is, it's part of it. It's obviously a major part, but like, we got to get back to that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I just loved everything about this. I saw Tasawat on Reddit mention how like amazing it is. Like this, this has been placed in the middle of one of the giant action set pieces of the story so far, and all of us are like, oh hell yeah, bunch of parents having dinner, like fuck yeah. Like I love that Wildbow is able to get that out of us. I think it's so impressive that we're excited about a distraction from the main like magical conflict to watch a bunch of old people eat dinner, or dessert. And they're not that old, I suppose. I can't keep thinking of the adults as the old people. I am getting there. Happy New Year to everyone, by the way. But yeah, so obviously we settle in with Jasmine, and Avery's parents arrive. We get names for her parents. Her dad is Connor, and her mum is Kelsey Kelly. And I just bring that up because, like, okay, so presumably Kelsey had a maiden name, but then she got married and became Kelsey Kelly, and then with great malice of forethought, still named her youngest daughter Kerry Kelly. I mean, honestly, most evil person in the book. Give me a Bristow any day. Yeah, like the Kelly family, they're right up there with Audrey and Aubrey's parents now, as far as I'm concerned. Also, Jasmine orders a brownie in this segment, so a brownie. Read into that what you will. But yeah, so to get into like the actual meat of this chapter, I feel like what was so insane to me about this was it genuinely felt to me like parents hanging out. Like, it invoked memories of me being 10, 12, and like having to listen to my parents hang out with like my friends' parents. It really just invoked that feeling in me in a way that is just so impressive. Like, Wob was able to capture that in a really accurate way, I feel. And at the same time as that, you can really sort of feel the Kenneteers like here, or like you can see the ways they resemble or contrast their parents in the way that this conversation flows. Like the way the Kellys talk is very Avery. Like there's a few moments where like Kelsey is sort of like, and you better keep trying to impress me, mister. And it felt like a bit of an Averyism, just not quite, but very close. And then obviously like Avery's parents are very like kind of touchy feely, lovey dovey at the start at least. And Jasmine sort of notes how they're quite energetic and positive, so that they kind of felt like the Averys in here. And then like, by contrast, like Jazz is very much kind of like the serious one, and there are points where Brett points out she does sound like Lucy. So she felt like a bit like Lucy. Verona's dad, bit more of a mixed bag, but he is sort of. Jasmine is trying to parent him and make him take care of himself, and he's not doing it. That's pretty fucking Verona. So I like Verona's not her dad, but she's of her dad. It feels harsher than I mean it to be, but I guess more than just seeing them in their parents, you can maybe sort of see. I think all three girls have this very defined idea of like what adult happiness is. You can see where Avery's need to have that love and support comes from her parents here. Obviously, we know we've discussed at length what Brett did to Verona. And then, Jasmine is the sort of serious one. You can kind of see how where Lucy might have gotten a bit of that from. Um, so yeah, like I really like how you can sort of feel the Kenneteers in their parents. I think that's really cool and adds to this feeling. Um, but with that said, I mean, the conversation kind of ebbs and flows throughout this whole dinner. That's like the majority of this extra material. There's some fun little details, like every time they almost try to think about where the Kenneteers are, something interrupts them. It's very fun. The spirits doing their jobs, enforcing those connection blockers. Um, but I think the easiest thing to do here is actually just going to kind of be to focus in on each parent, because that was sort of how I left the extra material thinking wasn't about specific events, but about each of the parents, because this is our first real time seeing them interact and focusing in on them as characters outside of exclusively their relationship with the Kenneteers. So I wanted to start with Connor, Avery's dad, because for some reason he felt like the one who I was learning the most about and thinking about the most after I read this. Like he reminded me a lot of Rowan when we saw Rowan in the record shop with Lucy and Verona, in that he seems like he maybe means well, like he's kind of good at heart. He's just a bit of a clueless dope when it comes to things like realizing his privilege and understanding that not everyone is just sort of, cis het white by default sort of thing. He he has this one comment where Jasmine brings up like she'd much rather be working in the hospital, and he's like, "Oh, I'll put in a good word for you. I know some people there. Like my brother works there, and that's just how these things work. Like I'll do that for you." And Jasmine's obviously grateful, but it's just like the way he delivers it. He's just like, oh, that's just the way things work here. It's like, yeah, but like, should it be? Like, should Jasmine only be able to get a job there because she knows you and you know your brother? Like, anyway, yeah. So like, kind of hard in the right place. Just spotty execution is how I would summarize Connor and Rowan. Really. And then obviously like he and Kelsey, Kelsey Kelly have this meltdown towards the end of the dinner, because obviously he's struggling to come to terms with Avery's sexuality. Basically seems to be the problem. And I mean I kind of struggle with this because I can understand why it is a bit tough for him. If he is someone who hasn't had to confront this before, I can see why I can sympathize a little bit with it just taking him a while and him thinking, oh well, maybe it's this, because he doesn't get it. And there is a bit of an irony to him. Like he seems to kind of want to blame Miss Hardy for Avery thinking she's gay. And the ironic thing about that whole situation is there are legitimate concerns that Avery's parents maybe should have about Avery and Miss Hardy, more on Avery's end than anything Miss Hardy's doing. But he's barking up entirely the wrong tree when it comes to what he should be concerned about with Miss Hardy and Avery. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of willing to cut Connor a bit of slack for now, because he seems to be trying. He's going fucking glacially slowly. But I think he's trying. He seems to listen to Jazz about it at the end of this extra material when she kind of figures out what's happening and confronts him as well. And so it's like, even if he's bringing this stuff up that Kelsey doesn't want him to and kind of ticking her off, if it leads to him hearing it from Jasmine as well and hearing it from more people leads to him making progress, I can live with it, I suppose. Like, I'll continue to give him minor passes as long as he's trying to move forward and succeeding, I suppose. You compare him to someone like Paul, and not that Paul is like anywhere near the minimum bar of what we should accept, but if you compare him to Paul, like he's trying and he's listening, and I think he deserves a bit of credit for that, even if it's taking him so fucking long. Because I guess if you're that old and you're only doing this stuff for the first time, you maybe got to cut him a bit of slack. I don't know. We'll see how he goes. Like, I reserve the right to change my mind. So to move on to his wife, Kelsey Kelly, I honestly don't have much to say here. She just seems kind of awesome and like clued in. Like she realizes they fucked up, and she's fully on board with accepting Avery from what I could gather. Like, yeah, not much to say, Kelsey Kelly. You seem pretty cool. Hopefully you can drag Connor forward with. Uh, Jazz as well. Not much to say on Jazz because she just continues to be like the gold fucking standard for parenting. She defends Lucy against Beta in exactly the way you can tell Lucy would want to be defended, and the way we would want her to defend Lucy. She's sort of telling Connor what's what. She's the one who organized this get together. She has all the right concerns about Lucy. Um, she knows something's up. Like, yeah, Jazz, yeah, continues to live up to the high expectations we have of her. Which leads us to the last parent in attendance, the newly named Butt Hayward. Yep, I called him Butt Hayward. It's a bottom tier joke, but he's a bottom tier guy. I feel like what's super telling about Brett here is how he's different, but also not when he's with these other adults. Like he still does come across as a bit of a disaster. He chooses to eat the food despite Jasmine telling him not to. He does that weird thing where he tries to not defend Beta against Jasmine, but like do that thing where he tries to like he basically does a poll. He tries to find a reason for it not to be racism, even though Jasmine's like, look, I have experience with this, it's racism. Um he also has that one line where he's like, oh yes, I liked Paul, which is read the fucking rumor, dude. Um so there's kind of this like that underlying selfishness in his way of thinking, everything comes back to him, I think is still there. But on the other hand, like he's able to carry a conversation. He does sort of listen to these other parents. Like he passes himself off as a pretty functional human being here, which is very different. Like he doesn't he talks so much here about how, oh, I can talk to Verona the same way I'm talking to you guys and it doesn't do anything. And it's like, well, you don't though. That's the whole problem. But at the same time, he presents himself just well enough here that you can see why people don't realize how bad things are with him and Verona. Like Jasmine seems to be getting an inkling, but he puts off just a good enough face, and he's got this excuse with his stomach right now that he can't quite put it all together. So yeah. He also has one bit where he says he doesn't have enough money to, get her therapy, but also he wants to send her to like this nature camp. And this was something that Ace of Sword on Reddit pointed out. That like it's kind of ridiculous that he goes directly from I can't afford therapy to I want to send her away to a nature camp, which presumably costs more. Um, I mean, the other thing that jumped out to me when he said this is he's saying it to Jazz, who's also a single mum and like working a job she doesn't particularly want, just the one. Like, everyone's financial situation is unique. I don't know what their respective salaries are, but I can't help but look at like Jasmine managing to do it and thinking, isn't there a way like you could, Brett? Like, I don't know. Verona's parents' priorities sort of continue to feel like a problem here. And speaking of, I do want to touch on Verona's mum because she does come up here. And there's not too much to say because she's talked about. She doesn't actually show up, although she might come to the next one. But Jasmine seems to kind of have her pegged the same way we did, is in that she's just kind of useless and yeah, has her priorities completely wrong. Jasmine gives us a bit more insight into why her moving back to Kennet really isn't feasible. Like, it's not just that she would lose her current job, but there's not really any other opportunities for her, which makes sense. But that, I don't know. It's your daughter. Figure it out. Like, force her to move in with you. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we've beat around this bush plenty. So yeah. That's the parents of the Kenneteers. This was just a really fun idea for an extra material. But before we are let go, we do get a little snippet from a conversation between two of our culprits. There's a line here that makes it clear there's at least one other. I kind of got the impression from it there's more. I don't know what that means. But basically, they talk about killing John. They don't want to talk about that. Sorry, they don't want to kill the Kenneteers. So that's nice. I've seen like a bunch of theories on who this could be because I feel like the obvious things everyone jumps to is sort of Matthew, Edith, and Charles as the two of the three, just because everyone else is either talked about not present in canon right now or doesn't talk normally. Like, no one here talks like a goblin or a fairy. So you're kind of left with Matthew and Edith and Charles through process of elimination. But I've seen some fun ones, like Spinagon on our Discord suggested it could be Edith and the girl by candlelight talking. Which I think there's been discussions before about whether they're separate entities, and so that could be fun. Nameless218 on Reddit suggests maybe it's Edith and the Doom, which I don't know, based on what we saw from Matthew's head in 5.d, if the Doom can really talk like that, especially to Edith. But I like these ideas that both these people bring up of like considering the Doom and the girl by candlelight as maybe a little bit separate from Matthew and Edith, and is that something everyone's been kind of overlooking? So yeah, like overall, another great little teaser that reminds us that hey, Kennete's still here. That shit's still going down. We've still got that deadline of the summer. Someone is 100% planning to don those furs and take the role after killing John. So, but yeah, so that's this extra material, a very very fun one. As I already said earlier, we will all be thankfully listening to Ruben's voice as well next week when we get back onto our regular schedule. So this is the last chance to answer this discussion question that has gone on for a very long time. Is Bristow's new network a good idea? What changes would you make? Yeah, so you can answer that in this discussion thread, in any of the other many discussion threads that are available. You can find us on Twitter. So live reads will be kicking up again on Twitter in like 2 days after this comes out, whenever the next chapter is out. There's also doofmedia.com. That's our website. You can find Power Reflections. You can find all the other shows. Kingslingers just had their New Year's Eve episode come out, and that show is actually wrapping up in only a few months. So now's your chance to get on board. If you miss listening to Matt and Scott talk about Wildbow works, well, now they're talking about Stephen King works, and it's almost as good. So yeah, head over and check out that podcast if you haven't. If you like Doof, everything that we do, patreon.com/doofmedia is the place to go and express that appreciation financially. So we can do things like pay to keep our websites up and buy equipment and stuff. These shows wouldn't exist in the format that they do without our patrons. And speaking of, Wildbow wouldn't have the freedom to experiment with stuff like this extra material and all the other extra materials if he didn't have, constant support from his patrons. So if you don't Patreon Wildbow and you want to keep reading his works and see him experiment with stuff like this, head on over to patreon.com/wildbow. And so yeah, with that said, see you all next week.